If you've been here before, you know what this is. If not, this started off as a 110 sized quad bike, and I cut the frame and extended the frame, made a seat mount, put a fuel tank in the front, and basically put the body on this and put huge wheels on it. Originally I had a GPX 125 engine in this, and it was pretty good. It ripped, it made about 12 or 13 horsepower and revved to about 14,000, and yeah, it was a bit of a ball terror. But now it's a bit sad. I've sold the engine. Due to recent back issues, I can't kickstart the engine anymore, so wanted to go for electric start. And the only way to do that was to kind of look outside the box and maybe look at upgrading the engine at the same time. So what I've done is I've purchased something. I'll show you. Went and bought myself a motor. This is a KTM Duke 390 engine, rated to about 42 horsepower and a lot of RPM. It's a nice little power plant. Grabbed it up for a couple of $100. So I didn't get just the engine, I got a few other bits. I have the entire wiring loom. I've got an exhaust. And I also got myself a nice shiny radiator. It's pretty thick. It's about 65mm thick. This is off a, I think it's a Suzuki or a Honda sports quad. Should do the job. This is going to mount right in front of the frame. The first step is obviously tearing it down and looking at what I've got to do to fit this engine. I say do. These shadows are really terrible, I'm really sorry. So, after a lot of staring mindlessly, what it seems like, at this thing, I was trying to save the back end of this, and you know when you try and save something and you end up doing 10 times much work as just remaking it? I'm just gonna remake it, because the main issue that I've got is this motor. It needs to be in the center, and I really want it in the center more for weight balance, because you can see a lot of the gear case and the clutch assembly is hanging over this side, but my sprocket is nowhere near like lining up. So you can see the sprocket right now is in line with this tube here, which is massively offset to that. And I've just been trying to think of what options I've got to fix that. And the only option I've got really, well, that's realistic, is either to remake the swing arm, reposition it, offset the gear, and do all this other stuff. And I am just gonna sort of play it by ear. If anything, I could maybe offset the swing arm to this way and put the cog on that side, or offset it to the left-hand side, and then take away some of this material, which I can very easily do, to get the gear over there. But the engine really needs to be in the center, and I can make the rear gear suit, but I have to put the rear gear on and in position first to figure out where I need to put the swing arm. So the first thing to do is going to be to mount the engine, because that's the most important thing for clearance and position, and what I'm going to do is make this front mount removable, so that'll unbolt, and the rear one I'll do kind of like how the pit bike motor style was, and like here how it bolted to the pit bike engine here and here. I'm going to make an angle off of here and build an upright off of here, and then build the back end off that. So what that'll do is it'll unbolt from here and down here, and the whole back end can come off, and then the engine can come out for future work. As you can see, the motor is on a slight tilt, so those need to be sort of upright. That's how the engine is in the bike that it came out of, the Duke 390 by KTM. So yeah, the first thing to do is like pull this whole rear off, and then sort of get the engine into its neutral position as far as like north-south, and then make the rear mount, and then make the front mount. That's basically my first step. Okay, so here's where we're at. I cut these plates out. I've got one on either side, and just obviously made the holes to suit. Put them on this lower one here, and at the front I welded a brace across between these two basically strut towers, and then just made a piece to go along here, and then snugged it all up, did it all up all tight, made sure the engine was aligned this way, and also this way. So don't pay much attention to this, it's not level, so neither is my GoPro. So the engine is completely square in the entire frame. Okay, so here's what we're dealing with. This is the center point of the actual frame itself. This is where the old sprocket is, and this is where the KTM sprocket is. So the nature of it is that this is the swing arm, and hang on, I'll get the ruler. So basically the old sprocket rode about here, and now the KTM wants to be about here, and that gets in the way of everything. So to sort this out, the other issue that came to mind was when I want to run this sprocket, the 62 sprocket, you can see just from looking at where the holes line up there, this mount for the suspension is going to not allow me to run the sprocket this big. Now I'll get into sprocket ratios in a second, and the reason why I want to run a 60 tooth is basically to gear it down. So the solution that I've come up with is that I will mount the swing arm in the center using these two, and mount it like this is. So I've retained that as it is, so I can get all the measurements and all the geometry and make that the same, because this is pretty dialed in suspension wise from the last setup. So what I'm going to do is recover that sleeve there from that, because I don't have any stock and it's actually the perfect size for that. So I can retain my shock mount, the integrity of the swing arm, all the travel and all that, if what I do is I cut this off here and cut this off here and make this arm go straight. And then I can mount the swing arm as normal on either side of this, with the sleeve going through the middle, and I retain all my suspension geometry and everything like that. And that way the sprocket will run along the outside of the swing arm. So I'll just have to make a hub and put that onto the axle and fix that onto the axle on the outside, which won't be too hard, but yeah, it took a long time to figure this stuff out. So what I've got to do is separate this holder, this bearing holder, and here and here, and this part for the sleeve for the swing arm pivot, and cut it all off and prep it to go straight pretty much. I'm just gonna like square it off to this, between this piece and this piece, and the pivot piece as well, and then sort of fit it all up in there. I'm going to rescue this sleeve over here and put that sleeve into here in the correct geometry, which I'm just going to start to mark out now. And I'm going to take the opportunity as well to move the swing arm slightly so that it's in line with the way the chain's going to travel. If the pivot is down here and it moves on a different axis to the line of the chain's going to go slack at the top when the pivot, the swing arm pivots up. The distance there is going to grow and increase when the swing arm moves, and it actually moves quite a lot. So I need to move this like in line with the wheels to retain the geometry, and I can get all of that off of there, and I'll transfer it to here, and I'll see where it's going to go. That's the next step. So okay, so I've rigged this up, and I basically put a straight edge on the back here, and then measured up to this line and then across to find the center of that, and then up and across to find the center of that hole. And this is what I came up with. And if this was confusing, then let's simplify it. So the bottom pivot and the top pivot there, so the bottom pivot and the top pivot, sorry, are 126 mil away from each other vertically, and then horizontally 13 mil away from each other. So that's all I really need to transfer over to the frame, because I'm going to change this lower point anyway here, because that's for the swing arm, and hopefully there's enough room in the strut area to join that on. I hope I've left myself enough meat, because I did cut them slightly lower, sorry. So this piece here, the pivot bush, I machined this down to 21.8 millimeters. So the hole that I'm going to drill in those brackets there is 22 millimeters it's going to be. So this should slip in with a bit of give, and then I can centralize all the moving parts in the back end. And once it's all measures up good, I'm just going to tack it all together, and yeah, it should be all square. $125, and then light and oops. Pretty sick.